It's Mark and Pete.
Hello, and welcome to the show. More colourful conversations with Mark and Pete, the programme devoted to religion, politics and business. This week, we pose the key question: why did God invent the media? Well, of course, ironically, it was the devil. Or was it? Well, as we've seen, the media has been in the media quite recently for many reasons. Scandals over the phone hacking, debates over whether there should be viewing of politicians talking about the election for 2015. Also, the invasiveness of lives, whether that's celebrities, businessmen, and even royalty. Is this really right? So with me today is Pete. So Pete, is the media too powerful?
Well, the media is powerful because we love to consume it. The media meaning, of course, things as varied as print newspapers, online newspapers, TV, and the plethora of new online media and ways of passing information from one person to another, in all those different things. We love to pass this information around, we love to consume it. So, yeah, the media is powerful because we love to consume it. But actually, I would argue that the central control of media is being loosened by the new types of media like social media, where the end user has more control over what the content is. So yes. I would say it is a problem when you have a handful of people having control over what information people get, because information and knowledge results in power and money, which can be abused. But I would say, well, the balance of power is shifting.
Yes, I think that people do have different views of the media. There's good and bad. In fact, most people would probably say that it's actually a useful thing because it provides good information. But on the downside is that with all the scandals that have happened, and unfortunately with the breaking of laws, particularly with the phone hacking, where journalists have overstepped the mark and actually just gone too far. They've invaded people's lives. They've actually accessed data and used data, which really should be something that should be kept private. But I thought what I would do is set up the conversation a little bit further with a brief poem which sort of highlights my view. This poem is called Scooped. If you have a need to succeed, the media is speedier. It skews the views to suit the news, invasive and exploitive, and fast to accuse. If you have an appetite for gossip, the media is greedier. It spits bulletins that are biting, sharp and exciting, piercing victims with venom who are vilified in writing. If you have a desire for salaciousness, the media is seedier. It woos and flatters the folk that matters, courts reputations, then leaves them in tatters. If you have an eye for detail, the media has an eye that is beadier. It is powerful and all-seeing, a belligerent being, aggressively pursuing the innocent fleeing. If you think you are knowledgeable, the media is an encyclopedia. It is informative and entertaining, knowledgeably and sustaining, smart to change form and socially campaigning. However, if you have a yearning for earning, the media is needier. It digs for dirt to pursue, the profitable review. So smile, as the next scoop could be starring you.
Yes, I'm afraid. But it does feel like that, actually. I talked earlier at the top of the show about how the users of media were gaining more control, but it doesn't always feel like that, I have to say. I mean, there's a sort of fear that the media is out to get you. Yes. Certainly with so much, you mentioned salaciousness in the poem, so much seems to decisions about what to include, editorial decisions, seem to depend upon how unpleasant how distasteful the news is. You know, people for salacious reasons like to see, they like to see other people in bad situations, and it does seem that it's not always the case that these people who have the media spotlight thrust upon them, they appear in the newspapers, they have their pictures taken, their film taken by film crews from TV shows, and they appear everywhere in clips on YouTube. And actually, they've done nothing wrong. It's exactly. So it's worrying, even if, like me, you're completely blameless.
Yes. I mean, one thing, though, we just sort of take a step back, because actually the phrase the media began quite some time ago, in fact, during the 1920s. Now, this was the notion of mass media, which was primarily restricted to print media, or newspapers, as we would probably associate today. But of course, at the time, there were other mediums that were starting to develop, radio, for example, and then television as it started to become more technologically advanced, particularly with the advent of colour. But of course, one of the things that is really prevalent today is this social media that you reference. So, as we all know, the success of Facebook and Twitter and many other social channels, whether that's YouTube, for example, it does open up this question as who has responsibility. On the one hand, when we say the media, we tend to sort of think, particularly, for example, a flagship broadcaster like the BBC, as having great responsibility. But then suddenly that responsibility is taken away because the general public can contribute now.
Yes. In fact, the contribution of the success of sites like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and other social media sites has been that the people, the public, expect to be able to contribute. They expect to be able to comment on articles that are put up online, and they expect to have their views, not just the views of whoever the editor is. So it's to a certain extent taken away the power from the editors and democratized it a little bit.
Yes.
I mean, I would say that the current climate will in people's attitudes to media will result in that becoming more and more the case. You get people, for example, movie critics. There seem to be fewer of them around these days because anyone can be a movie critic.
Yes.
People on YouTube get many YouTube channels, which are just people setting up saying, I'm going to criticize these movies, and they can put up clips on them. Anyone can do it. So it's putting the professionals on their toes. So overall, I don't think it's a bad thing.
No, I don't think it is a bad thing, but I think it comes back to what is the purpose of media and who has responsibility. And one of the things that's interesting is that the media itself tends to sort of set its own agenda. And the point being is that to define its purpose, it tends to sort of section it into three areas. The first one is bridging the knowledge gap. So effectively, its responsibility is to help influence people by providing knowledge, educating people, and for those people who perhaps need to have information and access to information, whether that's online or even whether that's on the radio, they can tune in and they can get information. The other one is actually agenda setting. So effectively, the argument there is to influence. And that's quite an interesting one because that is open for quite a lot of abuse. Whether it's a journalist who has a particular slant on a subject, or whether it's a broadcaster who perhaps has an agenda because it may be that they're influenced by their sponsors. And then the third one is about cultivation of perceptions. So effectively, how it shapes an audience's perception over time. Now, of course, that can be done in many ways, whether that's through a fictional program, a fact program, or even just a general discussion program where it brings on board the opportunity of, say, politicians, members of the public to give their perceptions or opinions. But I think that the question then would be is about also, is that enough? Is that enough that really to say the media in itself, where once it was regulated, how do you regulate the public? It's almost impossible.
Yes, well, I think that's true. Regulation has become difficult, even though you can see that the power base has shifted. What then happens is, if there's no one in charge, effectively, who do you blame when things go wrong? And
Yes.
what's driving the media, I guess, is to a large extent money. You were talking there about how you can influence, and of course, advertising is a big part of that. Advertising has become more subtle, I guess, because it is required that they need to get into social media as well.
Yes.
And so in getting more subtle, I'm using a polite term, being more subtle, they're having to lie and pretend that they're just putting up something that, this happened to me, or this is something that I've just reviewed because I like it, but in fact you're being paid to do it. So it's becoming more difficult to regulate. The advertising has been more difficult to regulate. The quality of programming, the factual accuracy of news reporting becomes more difficult when the news report you read is actually just someone's tweet. So it makes it difficult. But what is driving the development of media? Well, it is a useful way of making money, but it's not just money. It's getting across your message. If that's your message is, I want you to buy my product, that's partly it. But people who want to get certain information, or I guess certain ideas across, need the media if they want to spread it abroad. And let's just return to the question. Why did God invent the media, or was it the devil? Well, there's a lot of bad that comes through the media. I'm just thinking of the evils of the spreading of gossip. And if I go back to there's a verse in the Bible that springs to mind from James chapter 3, verse 5. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire, and the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. So the tongue, in the spreading of false information or boasting of how good something is when in fact it isn't. We're talking about the media. That's an example of it, how you can just cause a huge amount of damage. With what seems like a small thing, a small lie, can cause huge misery when it's about someone else, and when we're set among each other, set on each other, because we're just too interested in a good story. We just want to hear it. It's always been the case. People have spreading gossip in different ways. Now it can just spread further and faster. Yes. But the question is, that being the case, that it can cause a great deal of harm. Does that mean that it was made by the devil? Well, you see, I could put the opposite point of view. I talked about advertising. Well, from a Christian point of view, there is a message that Christians want to get across about Jesus, about the fact that Jesus is King, or as it puts it in this passage, that Jesus reigns. Isaiah 52 verse 7, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who publishes peace, who brings good news of happiness, who publishes salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. So, who invented the media? Well, I don't know who created it in the first place, but certainly God has used all different sorts of media to bring about peace and the message of peace and the good news. So, perhaps we should be admitting to ourselves that actually, even though it's a bit scary that the media spreads information so quickly, which could be false, the media itself is neutral.
Well, I think that that's true, because essentially they are channels, they are platforms, they are doors to conversations. And you're right. I mean, there are different opportunities to be able to speak and voice your opinions. But often what they will say in the media is how you tell the story. And I think it's not necessarily, as you say, the channel, whether it's television or whether it's a Twitter account, or even if it's online, whether that's a website and so on. It's actually how that tool is being used. So taking the other side, i.e. Playing the devil's advocate, is that it's how you tell that story and how you shape that story. Now, one of the things that's often noted in the media is that primarily a bad story tends to get more scrutiny and more visibility than a good story because it's not deemed to be newsworthy. So this concept that it's something that will catch the headlines is because this salaciousness, which again, when we reference the poem, that's one of the things that often drives the public to read something or to view something. And that's, if you like, the devil in us looking at the detail. And the detail there is that they are looking for something that is of bad news. Now, why is that? And that draws upon a human trait.
Yes, I mean, it draws upon the human trait that was touched upon in that Bible verse I read about the tongue, and that we love to hear bad things about other people. It's a human trait. It's the same. I think it's the same sort of human trait that makes us laugh at others' misfortune, used a lot in comedy to great effect. The pratfall, someone falls over, we laugh at it. Someone, we hear a terrible story about them, we're entertained by it. And so it's part of human nature. And as soon as you've got that, you've got a way of getting people's interest, then you're going to have people putting money and putting their creativity into creating that sort of story. If you're creating a news story, that means it's not true. You shouldn't be a creator. You should find it and investigate it. And that's why, I mean, you mentioned at the start of this episode about phone hacking. It was one of the things that you mentioned. I mean, that's an example of the media going wrong. Journalism going too far in trying to find information. So when we talk about is it good or bad, did the devil create it or God create it? Well, it's in itself neutral. The media is in itself neutral, but the content that you put into it, that's not neutral. And the methods that you use to find information, that's not neutral. You could be paying for people to give stories, telling gossip. I mean, that's not a good thing, surely. And this actually invading people's privacy by hacking into their phones, generally, people across the board decry this, saying, you don't get people saying, oh no, actually that's a good thing. I don't hear people saying that.
Yeah. That
despite people's insistence that it's important to have a free press, people still say you shouldn't be able to shouldn't be able to have the press looking at your private information. So there's still a desire for people to have areas of their lives that the media can't get at.
No, exactly. But I also think is where do you draw the line? Because one incident that brings to mind is when our future King of England here in the United Kingdom, William, was actually in France, I believe, with his then wife, Catherine. And the French media basically were told that they wanted to keep their lives private, and they'd hired a particular apartment, and unfortunately some probing paparazzi managed to gain a photograph of Kate, perhaps in a compromising position. That was deemed to be an invasion of privacy. And I think that's a very good example of which there are literally thousands where, whether it's a celebrity or perhaps a politician in a compromising position, has actually been exposed and placed in a public arena which wasn't something that was accepted and agreed. Now, that again is where they've used the media, whether that's photographic, whether it's online, whether it's through the TV, or even video, and they've exploited somebody's goodwill. And I think that's where, again, when we talk about this concept of, who invented the media? Why did God invent it? Or was it really the devil? And I don't think it's necessarily, as I say, the channel. I think that's true. It's how you use the channel. And I wonder whether really it's actually more that not so much the culprits that actually do it, it's those who consume it. Because if people didn't want it, then the paparazzi would not exist.
Now, yes, that's true. And there are cases of people just refusing to buy newspapers in large numbers in the Liverpool area.
Exactly.
People do not buy the Sun.
Yes.
And they say that it's not. We stock newspapers, but not the Sun. Is the line they often take.
And we should explain as well, because to our international listeners, because the Sun newspaper, a national, well-known publication here in the UK, during the 1980s, positioned an unfortunate incident that took place at Hillsborough for a football ground, where a large number of football supporters sadly lost their lives as a result of a crowd crush, and were deemed to be misrepresented quite significantly. 25 years on, they were exonerated, but unfortunately that actually tarnished the reputation of not just the individuals, but a whole community.
Yes, and the newspaper appears to not be sold in many different outlets in Liverpool. So I've seen it myself, shops where it says they don't sell it. I don't have the figures because I guess it's just the Sun publishers themselves who'd really know of how big a dent that's making on their sales. If it doesn't make a big dent, it's not going to affect them. Now, so we've talked about all different types of media. We've included social media. But now I just wanted to concentrate a little bit on the good side of social media, because we've just been talking about negative aspects of media. And that's because social media recently, over the past decade, has been seen as being an agent for freedom. Think of the Arab Spring, with people going on Twitter and sharing pictures about the brutality of the regime they're living under. And it does seem to be that this democratization of media that I was talking about has meant that people find out about what's going on in areas where there isn't a free press. So it's effectively spread the good side of the traditional media. So traditional media, you've got the newspapers, you've got TV and radio. The good side of that, of them spreading news stories, is that they reveal to the public things that would otherwise be hidden, that they need to know about, that should be on public record, sleazy deals by politicians, etc., etc. But when it comes to a totalitarian regime of whatever colour or political or religious persuasion, they can control the media and not have a free press. But it appears that they are not so successful at stopping social media, and people can access that. So we see here, I'm arguing again for the media being on the side of the angels, in that social media has been used to reveal abuses of power when the traditional media was silent or was just not present, was controlled by the government of that region.
Well, I do agree with that. I mean, that's where, again, it's a very good example where the channel, the tool, has actually been used to very good effect. And I think that that's something that can be used in many other mediums. But I think that it really comes down, again, to the fact that it's how it's used. And I think that the more accessibility to people using social media, as you say, or even any other media, to be able to put a positive message. And I think that this is something that is actually, you have to work harder at it, certainly from a communications point of view, to get a positive message across. Or more importantly, to try and take a stance which actually doesn't pour, if you like, political propaganda into the equation. This is the devil part of it, which actually distorts the news, which actually skews the whole message behind, a particular story. I think that if people worked a little bit harder about trying to sort of position things correctly, and I think that there are some very good examples where, and I have to say that politicians will be able to do that, as do, eminent media moguls who are very, very conscious of their social responsibilities. But I think it really comes down to the user, ultimately.
Yes, it does come down to the user. And when it comes to social media, it comes down to the user on both sides, because do you choose to spread this particular piece of information or not? First of all, do you consume it, the traditional role of a consumer, and then do you spread it about? Yes. The concept of gatekeeper is quite an important one here, in that, a gatekeeper is someone who allows you to contribute. So a gatekeeper might be the editor of a newspaper or the producer of a TV show. Well, you've not removed completely, but you've certainly reduced the strength of the gatekeeper, if you like. There still are gatekeepers, in that on social media there's always some form of censorship. Certainly for the larger websites that conduct it, like Facebook and Twitter, certain things aren't allowed to be said, and they would stop you if you were saying that. But in general, the gatekeepers have been removed so that you have access, and that means that people who wouldn't otherwise have a voice now have a voice. Like, for example, the Mark and Pete show, which uses as its main tool for gaining listenership social media. So it gives people who wouldn't have access to a widespread listenership or whatever it is, readership, whatever, the opportunity to do so, and so have their voice heard. So I think that the recent developments in media, brought about really by the nature of the internet, are good in that they're bringing in more voices, but it's bad in that, yes, you remove the gatekeepers, but you've also removed the not removed, but made it more difficult for people to keep a track on who has said what. And then if someone says something defamatory, it's quite difficult to track them down.
Yes. Well, look, listeners, we really encourage you to tell us your experience of dealing with the media. Have you had a good experience? Have you had a bad experience? Let us know what you think. And of course, we're talking about the media. So please, we encourage you to log on to markandpete.com and tell us your experience by emailing us, contact@markandpete.com, or even follow us on Twitter @markandpete, and let us know your experience. So join us again next time for more colourful conversations with Mark and Pete.